Alright, so now that my fabric is laid out how I want it to be, to make a pattern out of the tank top is going to be really simple. So along this line here is called your center front. It's exactly like it sounds. It is the center front of whatever piece you're using. This is going to be kind of like an anchor point for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tank top and I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm going to take the side seams and I'm going to match them together right along like that, which will really bring your center front out. So now I can clearly see this line is my center front. And then I'm going to take the tank top straps and I'm going to lay them one on top of each other, and you can really see the shape of what half of the tank top will look like. And so as I said, I folded this on the bias. So since I have this fold here, I can match it up to the fold on my tank top, and it will allow me to get exactly half of the pattern. So that when I unfold the fabric, I'll have one full front and one full back, and all I have to worry about is sewing the sides together, which will make this a very easy dress to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm actually going to pin it together so it doesn't move around on me. Okay, so now that I have it all pinned together, I'm going to take this fold line, which is my center front, and match it up to the folded bias, which will allow me to unfold it and have one full front piece and one full back piece, which will be really nice because I don't have any seams down the center of either of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just line this up right here. So when I have it laid out like this, I try and preserve as much fabric as I can because you can always reuse it for other projects or just have it as little scraps around the house to use for patching or whatever you might want to use it for. So when you're laying it out, make sure that you don't get too close to the edges up here or along the side here. So don't get too close to up here or along here. You also want to be aware that you're going to need to add some seam allowances along the sides of them. I'll go over what those are when we get to them, just because you're going to need to be able to sew it together. If you don't leave those seam allowances, you'll end up with a garment much smaller than you would intended, which is not any fun to wear. Alright, so now that I have a little bit extra here, I probably have about an inch extra up there, I'm going to start pinning this onto here, and then I'm going to start figuring out where my measurements take me. Alright, so now that I have all of this pinned down onto the fabric so it's not going to move around on me, I'm going to take my highlighter pen to make all of the tracings of this that I need, and then I'm going to go through with my ruler and really get my measurements set up on this. For me, I really like this armhole. I'm going to keep that. So I'm just going to trace right along that. And then like I said, I'm going to change the neck. So I want to make this a little bit wider. So what I'm intending to do is to follow it most of the way up. And then from here, I'm going to take my ruler and do something different. So we'll do that in a second. The neckline, I'm really not going to worry about because I'm intending to drastically change my neckline. So I'm just going to mark right above the arm, right on top of this tank, so I know where the top of my shoulder is going to be, and then I'm going to do some adjusting around there so I know that this ends right there, so just do a little cross mark. So then for the side seam, like I said, I really like where it comes from and I like the width of it, and so I'm just going to make another little mark that is going to be a 90-degree angle on this corner, and my intention is to take my measurement from here, and my measurement for that was 33 inches. And I'm just going to take it and draw a straight line all the way down because this is wide enough. I tested it on myself. This is wide enough that it will go down my whole body without having to worry about it being too tight. So those are the only markings I'm going to take from this tank top. Again, really easy, but it just gives me a starting place. So I'm going to leave the tank top on there for now in case I realize that I need something else from it. So like I said, I'm going to take this as a straight and just go straight up from this corner, from this last marking that I made, which was probably about 2 inches down from the bottom of my tank top piece. So I'm just going to go straight up to the edge. So what I want to do for the top of the tank top piece is just line up my ruler right along the top of that. I'm actually going to flip this so I can see the inches. So what I want to do is just to make a straight line along this where my other line is. I'm going to extend past where I really need to be just so I know where to start and stop. So I'm going to line up the inches. Right now I'm at 11 inches. It doesn't really matter. Right with where my cross mark from the outer sleeve is. So I want mine to be about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. It looks like this is going to match really well with 1 3/4 inches. So I'm just going to double trace over this to make sure it's straight out to 1 3/4 inches and cross mark it. So when I pull that away, I have a really nice square top of my shoulder over here, which is going to be great and easy to take this and then make it into the neck. So my next step is going to be to unpin this front so I can fold it out of my way. And I'm going to really fast before I move this, good thing I didn't move it earlier, is just mark right where the neck on this drops off. You can see the back here. This is right where the center front neck hits the front of my chest. So I kind of have a point that I'm aiming at because I don't want to really cut it too deep. Alright, so I'm going to pin this here since that's a little bit wobbly on me. Okay, so, alright, so now for the neck. So for what I want to do is I want to cut it in a deep V. I really like the V-neck on dresses. I think it's beautiful, and it will be really easy to slide over my head that way because I don't want to put any sort of zippers or entrances in. So if I do a V that's big enough to fit my head, I will be able to just slip the dress on and off, which will be great. So the measurement that I took for how deep I want it to go, as I showed you guys earlier, is 13 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side of the ruler where I can actually see the inches, and this short side of my ruler is 14 inches, which is perfect. So I have my mark here for where the front of the neck is. I'm going to move some stuff out of the way. So I'm just going to match up this corner. Alright, so when it's lined up right now, you can see the corner goes right to about 10 inches is how long the neck currently is. And like I said from my measurements, I want my neck to be 13 inches. So I'm just going to rotate this down the center front line to where it matches up with 13 inches, mark that spot, and then I'm just going to take it and draw a straight line along my ruler right down to that 13-inch mark. Alright. Okay, so now for the side of the dress. So I'm actually going to remove some of my pins just because I want to be able to fold this back and really get a straight line down. My tank top goes out a little bit, and while that's cute, it will end up with a really wide dress at the bottom, and I want it to be a straight shift dress like the 1920s style. So I'm just going to fold this guy back. I'm going to straighten out my fabric a little bit. I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to put the corner right into that corner. And usually the bottom of an armhole is going to be straight for the first little bit to go around. When they make patterns, they do straight bits at all of the corners because then it makes it easier for them to match them up and get a really clean transition. So it's really easy to just put the corner of my ruler right into that little cross mark that I made and get a straight line all the way down the side. So the side measurement that I got, as I said before, is 33 inches. I originally got 31, but I'm adding a little bit just for error's sake. You never know what's going to happen if I want it to be a little bit longer. It is so much easier to subtract fabric than it is to add fabric. So just always keep that in mind. If you think you might want it a little bit shorter, you can always cut it off. If you think you're going to want a little bit longer, it was really difficult to add fabric to it. So my ruler is only 24 inches long. So I'm just going to take it and just start drawing a straight line right down this edge. Alright, so I'm going to have to shift it or else I'm going to go off the table. So I'm going to remove this and just know that, actually, alright, so I'm going to have to move my fabric because clearly it's going off the edge of the table. So I'm just going to mark right where that 24 inches is. Then I'm going to move my fabric and very carefully I'm going to shift my fabric up the table so I can get those last inches on the bottom of the dress. Alright, so I'm going to give myself a little bit of room on this line here because I don't want to stick my ruler down here and have it be like way off. If I line it up with the line above it, I'm going to end up with a really straight line going down. So I'm going to take it and put it at the 10-inch mark, match up that line. I chose 10 inches because I'm only going to 33 inches and I went to 24 originally, which means I just have to go another 9 inches. And so from 10, that's a lot easier to figure out than any other number. So I'm just going to go down to 19 would be my number there. And again, make a little cross mark. And then the last step, my intention, as you saw from my picture, is to have a angled bottom. But bias is one of those tricky fabrics where it will kind of shift around on you, and I'll show you why later. But my intention is to cut a line straight across the bottom of the fabric, and then I'm going to hem it in the diagonal form when I get there. So for now, just take your ruler. I like the T-square, or I like the L square because I can match up along my side line and still get a straight hem, and just take it right across the bottom. All right, so now we're going to talk about that ever pesky seam allowance. So in most cases, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's the standard seam allowance. So what I'm going to do is right up this side seam, I'm just going to measure out a 1/2 inch. Usually if you have a clear ruler for this, it's really helpful. I do not have a clear ruler. I don't know where it went. So I'm just going to take, and on here I can see that this line here is my 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to take that all the way up, and I'm going to add a 1/2 inch. So I'm not going to add anything to the bottom of the dress down here just because, like I said, I already added 2 inches and I intend to cut it at a diagonal anyway. And so I'm not intending to add anything down here. If you feel like you want to roll your hem or do something special with your hem on a straight line, then by all means add an extra inch, usually on the bottom of the dress. For hem, you'd add an extra inch. You can trim down to a 1/2 inch if you need it to be. So along my armhole, we're going to do the same thing with a 1/2 inch, because my intention is to take this fabric and my lace and really sandwich them together on top of each other. So I'm going to do a 1/2 inch to allow myself some extra room to do that. And then I do know that this is a straight line, so I'm just going to take my ruler and draw a 1/2 inch right across the top there. And then again, we're going to do a 1/2 inch down the center front. And that's going to give us a really interesting little V to have to figure out how to sew. So that will be a great practice of how to sew a V. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these lines and connect them so I have a really clean, crisp line to cut with my scissors, because I don't really want to be guessing at where all of my lines are. And at this point is a good time to be able to take off the crop top so that I don't have to fight it while I am cutting and sewing. Alright, so like I said, we're just going to take our ruler, line it up with all the different marks, and draw in a straight line to be able to cut with the scissors. Alright, so this is a French curve. It is used for arm holes and the such to give you a really nice curve. So I'm just going to line this up with the thing that I have. Usually it won't fill an entire armhole, it depends on the size. Since I'm a larger size, I'm going to need to do multiple curves. So I'm just going to follow this down and around, and then just readjust as I get lower down. You can also flip and readjust if that seems like it's going to fit a little bit better. It doesn't quite yet. Maybe it will. Sometimes it will take a lot of messing around with your curve to figure out where it is going to go. Alright, so that gave me a really nice easy curve to follow there. And then, like I said, they do straight lines at the bottom of armholes, so I'm just going to take this straight line here and extend it straight out so that I also get a nice transition right there. Alright, and then I'm just going to take this straight line all the way down. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it because I really don't want this fabric moving around while I cut it. As I said, I'm cutting 2 layers of dress, and so I really want to be accurate with how I am cutting this out. Alright, so now that I have everything pinned in place, I'm going to cut it all out. Alright, so now that it is all cut out, we have a beautiful first layer for the flapping dress. So what I'm going to do now is just take this and replicate it completely onto the lace layer that I have because I want them to match up exactly. Alright, so now I have this base piece pinned to my lace fabric. So I didn't mention it before because I forgot, but always make sure when you're pinning fabrics together, when you're cutting them, that you put the right sides together. So always make sure when you're folding fabrics together that the right sides face each other so that you're cutting the wrong side of the fabric. So that when you sew them together, the right side will be on the outside, or else you end up with backwards pattern pieces, and those are really hard to work with because then you have 2 rights or 2 lefts or just pieces that don't sew together at all, or your garment ends up inside out. So always make sure that your right sides are together. So this is my first time using lace on bias, so I'm really not sure what's going to happen. I don't know if I've ever seen lace used on bias, but they use lace a lot in that time period, so it must be something that can be done. So I'm just going to really quickly cut this out, and I will have all of my fabric ready to go. Alright, so now that I have that all cut out, I have a lace layer where I have 2, so I have the front and the back, and same thing with my inner layer, I have a front and a back. So I'm going to pin them together and start sewing and get these 2 pieces together. I play at home, if I stay I might not leave alone. Oh honey, I'm good, I could have another but I probably should not. I gotta play.